Loved. Can't remember the rest of it. How is it okay?
For Facebook, it's okay. I'm checking YouTube.
A year ago last Thursday, I was wandering in the zoo when I met a man who thought he knew the lot. He was laying down the laws on the habits of baboons and how many quills a porcupine has got. I said to him, "What's that animal over there? Is it an okapi?" Well, I would have gone on thinking that were true when the animal in question went and put that... Okay. Went and put that man to shame and said, "I'm not an okapi, I'm a gnu. Yes, I'm a gnu. I wish I could gnash my teeth at you. I'm a gnu. I'm not a camel, nor a kangaroo." Does anyone know this song? You're all looking like you've never heard. The gnu song. It's a song about gnus. A very famous song.
Well, I don't know where, but not here.
GNU, look it up. Flanders and Swan, they had a whole series of funny songs.
You picked it up with the Canucks, or?
Huh?
You picked it up with the Canucks? Canadians?
Oh, okay, no.
They do a lot of canoeing.
That's a canoe.
Yeah.
No, I said GNU.
Oh, canoe!
I'm not a camel, nor a kangaroo. I'm a GNU. I wish I could gnash my teeth at you.
Okay.
I'm a GNU, spelled GNU.
Yeah.
And I'm not a camel, nor a kangaroo. But they have GNUs in Canada, don't they?
Canoes in Canada, well, probably from zoos.
Where are GNUs from?
South Africa, or Southern Africa.
Okay.
I've once seen in Dutch we call them the wildebeest. And I've seen the wildebeest track about 100,000 of them jumping off a hill and crossing a river. There's huge herds of them and they follow the race. So they're grazing animals, they graze all the grass, and then it gets dry and they get hungry and then they go to the next patch.
Right.
They make kind of a triangle. They have to cross different rivers, and the crocs and the other predators know that they're coming. So they jump with hundreds of them in the river, try to cross, and the crocs then will pick off a few of the older ones.
Okay. Isn't that what happens with penguins? Well, when penguins are going into the water, they all crowd by the edge of the ice because the leopard seals are waiting. But when one goes in, they all know that that's the one that's going to get caught, so then they all start piling in because the leopard seal can only pick off one of them.
That's how it works.
So they all crowd by the edge of the ice and try and shove each other in and back off. And yes, until one of them's like, "Oh, sod it, I'll go," and he dives in. So it's usually the second one that gets picked off. Okay, so we can start the session this evening. If everyone is ready. Still be a few people coming late. If we can sit together, the program for the evening, we're going to sit together for a short while, do some Dhamma reflection, maybe a few questions, and then definitely finish by 8 o'clock. That's the plan. So, settle yourself into your meditation posture. Feel free to use the meditation system you are accustomed to. Please do note, however, the difference between placing your attention onto an object of focus and just mindfulness. Mindfulness is that brightness, that knowing, that awareness. When you know yourself, you are recollected. Non-mindfulness, when you are lost in thought, or even lost in meditation object, when attention is going away from yourself, when attention gets lost, you forget yourself. Then after some time you suddenly remember, hey, I'm meditating. That's when awareness has returned. Note carefully the difference, the brightness of awareness, of recollection, and the dullness of forgetting when the mind is lost, caught up in the world of concepts, the world of ideas, the constructed universe, maya, delusion. You may note when your attention has returned, when recollection has reignited, try to label it with some kind of recognition. I'm here, or recollected, or sati, mindfulness. Any word, any phrase that you choose is okay, but just to label and note when the mind is recollected, and when the mind becomes lost, after some time becomes recollected again, you note again with your word, I'm back, or here, or present, or samma arahang, whatever word you choose to describe it. This will help to delineate or make clear. When you are recollected and when you are not. Again, recollection is just that feeling, knowing your own presence. As mentioned, do feel free to use whatever meditation system you are accustomed to. We're going to sit together for 20 minutes or so. Bring your mind together as bright and as still as you can. Take a few moments to remember the sharing of merits. Bodhicitta means our practice is not just for ourselves, but for all world beings. So we make the deliberate intention to share whatever merits we may gain from our practice for the benefit of all world beings. Dedicating whatever way that you can, using the words or imagination. Sabbe buddha balapata pachekanancha yang balang arahantanancha tejena rakang bandami sabbaso sabba buddha nubhavena satta soti bhavantu te sabbe buddha balapata pachekanancha yang balang Arahantanancha tejena rakang bandami sabbaso sabbadhamma nubhavena satta soti bhavantu te sabbe buddha balapata pachekanancha yang balang arahantanancha tejena rakang bandami sabbaso sabbasangha nubhavena satta soti Bhavantu te. Okay, good. Thank you all for coming. And this evening, I want to talk, really the only Dhamma talk I have left after all these years, thinking of more and more and more topics, but the older I get, the less and less I have to talk about. And there is really only one topic remaining, and that is what I would call the mystic path. That is, Buddhism and other enlightenment traditions are geared towards, they revolve around and they point to this process of gaining enlightenment, whatever enlightenment is. And that's our job. Now, there are cultural aspects to Buddhism, there are scholarly aspects to Buddhism, but really the original suttas are all geared towards this one particular path. I want to lay it out from beginning to midpoint, not going all the way to the end because I haven't got there yet, but I can point to you quite clearly. Some people in this world will have an interest in this kind of practice. Many people won't. If you've noticed, near my temple, Wat Pak Nam, they have a, I don't know what it's called, something like jazz aerobics. There's a couple of women who have a stage and they dance to music in certain moves, and then people come and exercise along with them. And that's quite popular. There's always like 60 or 70 people come for a little jazz aerobics. But talk about enlightenment. There's not so many people interested. So for some of us, I do fully understand that this particular path is not for everybody, but some people have an interest. There was one time the Buddha supposedly went up to one of the heavenly realms, and he was asked by Sakka, the king of the gods. He said, why do people not understand the practice? He said, desire and putting an end to desire. When some people hear about this, their hearts do not respond. And then he said to the king of the gods, desire is led by thinking. When the thinking stops, the desire will surely stop too, which is interesting. I'm just going to leave that with you. See if you desire things without thinking about them. Can you do it? Can you desire something without thinking about it? If I put some nice loaf of bread in front of you here, that's what gets me. I don't know, maybe you guys, you're all lay people, so you can have bread and things, but a nice iPhone. Can you have desire come up without thinking about it? Experiment, see what happens. So this practice is one of withdrawing or extracting the mind from Maya, delusion. This concept that the world is delusionary or illusionary. It's not that the world doesn't exist, it's that we have misunderstood the world. That's why it's delusion and not illusion. So the world is really there, but we have become deluded about it, and withdrawing our mind from this and entering into the light of awareness and enlightenment is our job. So what does this mean? We carry around with us a set of stories. I like to use the word stories. You can use the word concepts. If you are a psychologist, you might use the word constructs. What it means is these stories we carry around, that this is our way of understanding the world. The world is too complicated to understand in totality. So we have these small stories that help us and guide our behavior and our understanding. Don't know if you know the science populist Carl Sagan. Yeah, I used to worship Carl Sagan until many years later when I found out just how wrong he was about so many things. He wrote this very good article about a grain of salt and how many atoms there are in a grain of salt and the spatial arrangement between the grains, between the atoms and molecules in the salt. And then he compared it to the human brain, how many synapses we have, how much information we can process, and he came to the conclusion the human mind is unable to comprehend a grain of salt in its entirety. What we can understand is a pattern. So we can understand salt is sodium and chlorine, right? So we can understand is sodium and chlorine arranged in a kind of lattice network. So we can understand this grain of salt in general. We can have a story about it. So that's how we understand the world. It's too complicated, even just yourself or your friends or your partners or society or Thai visa rules. They're too complicated for a human being to possibly comprehend. Man, I have to do that this week. So we have stories that give us rules of thumb, ways to understand people and the world. Sometimes very simple stories, sometimes very complicated stories. Another way to think about it is models. We have models for how the world is. I have my favorite models. Here's one. To understand people. Of course, you can't understand even one person, but you can have a story. So, to understand people, there are two kinds of people in this world. Those who can extrapolate from incomplete data. Come on, nobody get that joke. That's a good joke, man. There are two kinds of people in this world, and you should avoid both of them. So we think that we have these little stories of ways that we understand the world, and then you don't realize that you carry this conceptual framework around with you. And in psychology, this is called personal construct theory. Was popularized by George Kelly, quite a good psychologist. I just did a podcast with a Kellyite psychology teacher from California, so that'll be coming out in a few days. Kelly said that you carry these, what he called personal constructs, around with you, and so long as your stories, your constructs can explain the world and what you are experiencing, you are reasonably happy and content. But when your stories break down, or when they are challenged, you start to suffer a little bit. I noticed this. I just was in Canada, and I went for a nice walk to the park, and I have to cross some kind of busy highways with some slip roads coming in and out. And as I was going out onto the slip road, I looked right, no cars coming, and I walked out. I forgot. Canada, the cars come from the left, so yeah, I nearly got boned down. Breaks my constructs. I have that construct. I don't even know I have that construct, that you look right for oncoming traffic, and I have to change it to look left for oncoming traffic. I don't even know I carry that construct around with me, but that's a story that I have. Conceptual framework, story, construct, however you want to think about it. When your constructs don't work, then you feel suffering, or when they are challenged, you feel agitated. Sometimes I like to do this. I deliberately throw things at people just to agitate them. I say things like, global warming is complete nonsense. How do you feel? Do you feel agitated? So I had a room of people in Canada, and I said, this global warming is complete nonsense. And I played a clip of Al Gore, 2007. He said in his Nobel Prize-winning acceptance speech, he said, just think of it, scientists tell us in as little as 7 years, the North Pole will be completely gone, North Pole ice cap will be gone in summer months. As little as 7 years. Now, you notice he used the word could. And whenever you have the word could, you can replace that sentence with the words could not, and it's equally true. It could be gone in 7 years. It could also not be gone in 7 years. So I pulled the data up in July 2007 when he gave the speech. The North Pole ice cap was, I think, 8.7 million square miles. And the figure for this July, I think it was 8.8 million square miles. There's no change. This data is freely available. So now, how do you feel? Have it challenged your construct? Do you not care? We all know that the ice cap isn't going to melt, really, don't we? Do we? I like doing political ones, but you get on dodgy ground. Why did Joe Biden blow up Russia's gas pipeline? So when you hear something that doesn't agree with your preconceptions, your stories, you feel agitated. I want to vote for Donald Trump. Agitated. Joe Biden is the worst president in the history of America. Agitated. So we carry these stories around, and this make up our conceptual universe. Stories about our health and our diet and people and politics and society and the future and the past and who we are and what we are supposed to do. And that is where most people will live their lives, in this conceptual world. When nothing's challenging it, you feel fairly peaceful. When something is challenging it, you feel more agitated. You want to try to explain away the things that challenge your framework. These concepts that we carry around include religious concepts, includes Buddhism. All of Buddhism can fit. They're just more concepts. You can rearrange your concepts to change the world that you live in. You can switch out your bad concepts for better concepts. Concepts or stories of revenge that you're going to get against Thai immigration or whoever it is that you're disliking, and you can replace it with concepts of forgiveness and joy. I have a lot of things in my mind right now. I have to be careful sometimes. So you can change your concepts, you can reconstruct your world in a better way, but you're still moving deck chairs around on the Titanic. You're still just changing one set of concepts for another set of concepts. Even Buddhism is another set of concepts. We may put it against Christianity, or we may put Hinayana Buddhism against Mahayana Buddhism, or my teacher against that other teacher. Right? This happens a lot. One time, first couple of years when I came to Thailand, and I went to an event in the World Fellowship of Buddhists, where some of us used to go years ago. I don't know if they still exist now, but still there. The building is there, but do they do anything? Yeah. And I went there to an event, and there was a Thai monk there. He said, "Oh, it's so nice to see a foreigner come and ordain in Thailand. I'm so happy. Really glad that you would come and become a monk in Thailand and learn Buddhism." He said, "What temple do you live at?" I said, "Oh, I'm at Wat Pak Nam." He said, Oh, well, never mind." Because his temple is the right temple and my temple's the wrong temple, obviously. So even Buddhism is another set of concepts. Our job, this is Maya, this is what was called Maya, M-A-Y-A, or delusion, the delusionary world that we live in. Doesn't mean it's illusion, the concepts are important, we have to get by in the world, we have to have some kind of framework of understanding to guide behavior. But the path, the mystic path, is to step out of this conceptual world that we live in. So the first step that we can take out of the conceptual world is to bring attention into raw experience. If we bring attention to raw experience, we've dropped this conceptual. It's still there, but we have withdrawn from it and now are just in straightforward experiencing. For example, you can put the attention onto the breath, just the in-breath and the out-breath. Feel it, just raw. You don't need concepts. You don't need to think about the breath or determine what is the breath called in Sanskrit, or should I have long breath or short breath, or breath at the belly or breath at the nose. You can just put attention onto breathing, and it's raw and it's present and it's here. A lot of our practices are like that. So you can put attention onto eating. Monks do this, it's listed in the suttas. We have a lot of rules about eating and how we eat. Not allowed to scrape our spoon on the side of the bowl. It's funny when I eat with lay people and you get your ice cream bowl and you to get that last little bit from around it, and it's, no, you can't do that. You're supposed to eat one mouthful and then stop and not prepare the next mouthful until you finish this one. And then we have a lot of these rules that you probably don't know about. Just as well, because you'd be thinking, that monk's no good. Look at him. He's prepared his next spoonful before he's finished his current spoonful. It's raw experiencing. Walking meditation, you feel the feet on the ground, just raw experience, and it's quite beautiful and it's quite peaceful. It's quite serene, because the human mind doesn't like to be there normally. Normally you like to be in your conceptual world, manipulating your concepts, rearranging your deck chairs, figuring out who to vote for in the next election, figuring out which country to go and retire in, figuring out if Manchester United is going to win the World Cup. People ask me about football because I'm from Manchester. I don't care. Someone said to me, "Where are you from?" I said, I'm from near Manchester. He said, "What, Manchester United or Manchester City?" I said, "Oh, Manchester United. Manchester City is in Glasgow." He said, I played him along for about 10 minutes on this kind of stuff, just for my own vicious amusement. So what happens when you sit and meditate? Your mind wants to go back into the conceptual world, right? You sit, you start thinking. If you're reasonably comfortable, the temperature's okay, nobody's bothering you, I'm going to watch the breath, in breath, out breath, and then an idea comes up and you're gone. Is that your experience so much? That's the conceptual world of Maya, illusion, that you have to withdraw from. It's a little disturbing because it's very comfortable in there, especially if you can arrange your concepts in a reasonable way, if you're reasonably sane and together as a human being, then that's a really comfortable place to be. It's just in Canada, and there's a number of students, they kept talking to me about being triggered by things. It's a bit strange. I've never really understood that this was actually a way that people have of thinking, that they have a right to live happily and at ease, and for nothing to come and trigger. And trigger what? For a trigger, you have to have a loaded gun. What's your loaded gun that you're carrying around? It's these stories. So you say Donald Trump to someone and triggered. I don't like him, or I do like him, I want to make America great again, I want whatever. Somebody parked their car outside the center, and there's somebody in the center who had problems with the guy who parked his car. Anyway, he lost his keys, so the car was parked there for several weeks. Anyway, she wouldn't come into the temple because she gets triggered by the car, seeing the car. I was trying to say, you don't get triggered by things unless you're carrying it around with you. This is your conceptual world, your ideas you're carrying around with you, and when they get challenged, you don't like it. So we learn to withdraw, extract out from that conceptual universe. It's really important because Buddhism also is another set of constructs, is another set of stories that infiltrate into that conceptual world and seem to say, hey, you know, there's actually a way out. I think of it like a computer game. And then somewhere while you're in the computer game, there's a little character comes on screen that says, turn off your computer. How do I do that? I don't know how to do that. Where's the computer? And you're looking around in the game for the computer to turn off. That's what we're doing so much of the time with Buddhist practice. We're not withdrawing from this conceptual world, we're looking to go into another concept, looking to hold another better concept, unable to escape from the game. The Matrix. There's a program called Red Dwarf. Anybody seen Red Dwarf? And they had a game called Better Than Life, and you put these electrodes on and you're in the computer game, and it looks at your thoughts and it constructs a world for you that's better than real life. And this game was deadly because once you're in it, nobody wants to come out. And eventually the guy, Dave Lister, right, was in it, and eventually he comes out and he escapes the game. And he's back on the spaceship and he's happy and it's all nice, and he makes himself some toast, and then he accidentally knocks the toast onto the floor and it lands butter side up. It's like, wait, nobody ever knocks, the toast never lands butter side up. So he makes 50 pieces of toast and knocks them all onto the floor and they all land butter side up. And he realized he's still in the game. He's constructing a better universe for him. Honestly, that's how it is with Buddhist concepts, that we're trying to put these concepts up to fight against the other concepts, to rearrange the conceptual world. We have to step out. So coming into raw experiencing is the first step, because you're leaving the conceptual world where it is. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to change it. You don't have to have the right concepts. You just start to get used to the feeling of yourself when you're not lost in the conceptual world, in Maya, delusion. So raw experience is very good. Feeling the feeling under your feet, eating the food, watching the breath. But even these, after a while, you start to realize all you've done is you've focused attention onto this now, instead of the thinking. So it starts to dawn on you that focusing on some particular object is still just holding the mind in a certain place, still not liberation. So the next step from raw experiencing is to see the actual nature of the mind. Seeing this, what happens? The mind moves from one thing to another thing, to another thing, to another thing. One thing at a time. You might feel like the car is always parked outside. You may feel like Thai immigration office is always there in Jengwatana. And objectively, it is. If you want to build a bridge or get a visa, you have to think in that way. But raw experiencing, seeing the own mind, shows one thing comes up into attention. Then it dissipates and leaves attention. We go into pure phenomenology in philosophical terms, which means the thing that's real is the thing that you are perceiving at that moment. One perception arises. For a few seconds, drops, another perception arises, drops, another perception. And to a meditator, you should at some point start to see this, that while you are sitting, you say, okay, I'm going to watch the in-breath, I'm going to watch the out-breath, I'm going to watch the in-breath, I'm going to watch Game of Thrones, I'm going to have something to eat on the way home, I'm going to watch my in-breath, I can hear the person next to me coughing, I'm going to and then I can feel the air conditioner, and oh, that's right, I have to get the engineers out to fix my air conditioner, and I think I'll call them tomorrow. And the mind is moving from one thing to another thing, to another thing, to another thing. You might feel like your mind is out of control. You may feel like you have a monkey mind. This is actually what the mind is all of the time. You just don't notice it. The conceptual world, the stories, they try to bring order out of chaos. Our path is going into that chaos. This was not what the Buddha described as someone who has too much thinking. This is how he described all consciousness. And if you start to see that, you're heading in the right direction into the chaos. The mind moves from one thing to another thing to another thing, like a monkey swinging through the forest. Grabs one branch, lets go, grabs another branch, lets go, grabs another branch. This is all conscious life. It's not because you think too much. It's not because your mind is jumping around. It's because you've left behind the stories that organize your universe. And now you're seeing pure phenomenology, what's actually there, what's actually being perceived from moment to moment. This kind of meditation is different to just raw experiencing, right? Because you're not just focusing the attention on the breath and trying to hold it there. You're not trying to create this one particular meditation experience. You're starting to see the nature of what is actually there. How your mind, how your consciousness actually works. Whatever the mind lands on, that's attention. You're paying attention to that thing. Right now you're paying attention to me. You could pay attention to this Buddha statue. Green. Did you notice it was green before I mentioned it? It's right there in front of you. If you didn't put attention onto it, you wouldn't notice. So where attention goes, feeling sparks up. You like it or you dislike it, or you feel neutral. This is what is called dependent origination, paticca samuppada. Where attention lands, you spark up this reaction of liking and disliking, wanting or not wanting, attachment or non-attachment, becoming, conscious engagement with the object. 99% of your life is spent consciously engaged with objects that you like or dislike. You ignore the ones you feel neutral about. Did you ever comment to somebody how your ear feels? Can you feel your ear? Do you like it or dislike it? But you've commented to people about your headache or your bad back. Or you've commented to people how nice your stomach feels when you eat some nice brown bread or durian or guitiao, whatever it is. Because almost all of your attention follows liking and disliking. we pay attention. When attention lands on something, then you get this reaction of liking and disliking. You are drawn naturally into objects where attention goes. So be careful where you put attention. If you put our attention onto things that generate or stimulate greed, anger or delusion, you will become greedy, angry or deluded. If you put attention into places that stimulate compassion, forgiveness, mindfulness, then you will become more compassionate, forgiving and mindful. It's a straightforward psychodynamic mechanism. It's not that you're a good person or a bad person, it's because of where you put attention. This is why vampires, when a vampire bites you, you become a vampire, right? Don't laugh. This is serious stuff. Vampires mean bad qualities. You can't have a bad quality and not be a person of that bad quality. You can't be angry but be a nice person. You can't be greedy but be a non-greedy person. When that thing bites you, you become it. That was the meaning of vampires. Vampires can only come into your house if you invite them, right? Bad qualities only come into your heart and your mind if you invite them in. There's always a point of choice. So choose carefully where you put attention. Mindfulness should bring daylight. Vampires don't like daylight. They represent bad qualities. That's why these stories have these particular formats. So, first step, conceptual universe. Second step, out of the conceptual universe into raw experiencing. Third step, out of raw experiencing on particular objects. And just mindful of the way consciousness grabs one thing after another thing after another thing. Final stage, what happens if your attention stops going out to anything? This was how the Buddha actually described meditation. He said, when the eye lands on an object of form, eye consciousness arises with attention. Do not get caught or involved in that eye consciousness, or unwholesome states will invade your mind. He dwells with restraint regarding the eye sense. When the ear hears a sound with attention, hearing consciousness arises. If you get caught in that hearing consciousness by paying attention to its signs and features, unwholesome states will invade the mind. He dwells with restraint regarding the ear sense. He dwells with restraint regarding the body sense, the tongue sense, the nose sense, and the mind sense, thinking. Because ideas occur and your attention goes to the idea, just like something happens and your eye goes to look at somebody comes in through the door, you look at them, right? Somebody makes a sound behind you, your ear goes to the hearing consciousness. Always moving, jumping around. What happens if your mind doesn't go out to attend to anything? That was the exact way that the Buddha taught meditation. You hold yourself in restraint. If you want to look it up, this is called guarding the sense doors. It's a very simple, straightforward, clear formula. So what happens? First of all, you'll fall asleep because you've got nothing to entertain you, nothing to put attention onto. It will feel dull because, well, if my attention's not going to anything, where is it? It's like bzzz. But after a while, you start to know yourself apart from what you are attending to. This sense of I am, rather than I am this or I am that. Just that sense of raw consciousness. before consciousness has landed on any object. This is quite important because there is in meditation certain states that arise when you lose the sense of self. You go into an expanded consciousness and it's kind of oozy and woozy and there's not much happening and it's kind of peaceful. You might be awake, you might not be awake. It's kind of like, feels like spaciousness and I've disappeared. That's falling asleep while you're sitting. That's not the direction of meditation. It's not a bad sign if you've done this and do this, but it is a dead end. And I want to make that clear because nobody made it clear to me. And I spent years tinkering around with this. I could even do it walking around. It's like, myself is gone. Consciousness intensifies. The sense of self intensifies. This word intensification is really important, indicative. Consciousness gathers. The Buddha used this word. He said it gathers, it centers, and it unifies. It becomes bright. Not lights, because that's I, but becomes bright. There's also a feeling of power, powerfulness that comes through the body. You are not sleeping. The body will sit awake and like, oh, this is really real. This is really present. This is not anything to do with that conceptual world that I live in. Attention is sustained and guarded. Number one. It's called applied and sustained attention. Number two, there's piti, rapture. An energization comes through the body that feels like this is really, it's not rapt, it's not pleasant as in a nice food or listening to Betty Davis. Rapture. Do you know Betty Davis? Not the actress. The funk singer. Right, okay. She's my go-to when I need a put the headphones on. It's not the rapture or the happiness that comes from sense contact. Something nice to eat, hear, smell, taste, touch, think about. Those are sense pleasures. This is the rapture that arises when the mind isn't activating any of the senses. And consciousness comes together, and it's bright, and it's strong, it's powerful, it's controlled, and then this rapture will come through the body. Was stage part 2, then stage 3 was happiness. Sukha arises. Again, a sukha, not because of sense pleasure or sensory contact. Consciousness by itself, this may sound weird, but is perfectly self-satisfied. Consciousness on its own is purified and it's happy. Doesn't need anything added to it. But because we live outside in the conceptual world, it's hard to experience. Sometimes, I'm mentioning these things. These are not practices. These are things that start to arise after you've been doing practices in the right way. And I'm mentioning them because nobody mentioned them to me when I was practicing, so for many years I missed it. So I'm talking about it so that if and when you see and experience these things, you're like, oh, that's right. Because this consciousness is you. It appears not as something magical and mystical and fantastical. It's something, what was the word somebody used? Trying to think of it. Someone used it recently. It feels ordinary. Feels familiar. Because it is your own consciousness, but purified of not sensory consciousness. So sukha, and then the third one, equanimity, or an equipoise that arises from the mind not being scattered. Now there is in the suttas listed an equanimity that arises when the mind is scattered. So you've had something nice to eat, you're in a nice comfortable chair and you're sat back and you've got the phone in your hand and you've got Facebook going and you've got a cup of tea and the cat on your lap. And that's a kind of equanimity, right? But the mind is scattered and moving around. In Buddhist terminology, it's called papancha. Papancha. So nipapancha, when the mind is not scattered, not moving around, that's the equanimity that I call equipoise, because the mind is like pinpoint clear, sharp, like crystal clear. These were called jhana experiences or concentration experiences, but please note that you are not concentrating on an object. This is consciousness as it becomes purified. So this is this trek out of the conceptual world. These experiences then are not no more concepts. They're not new ideas. You've left that world long behind. So I will finish right now with the title that I called this talk, The Long Withdrawing Roar. Did anybody look up the poem? You didn't do any homework at all? Just come along and explain it to me. I'm not much of I don't get off on poems very much. I like silly songs, but poems, not so much. So this particular poem, called Dover Beach, you can look it up if you want. I don't get off on poems. But he had this fantastic, beautiful concept in the poem. He was bemoaning the lack of faith in the modern generation. I think this was like post-World War II, it was quite a while ago. And he's saying that faith in Christianity, in God, is withdrawing, like the waves on the beach pick up the pebbles and throw the pebbles, and it has this great roaring sound of the beach. But as the tide withdraws, the roar doesn't get less, it's just as strong as it always was, but it's more distant, so you can't hear it or experience it in the same way. And he said that was the retreat of Christianity, of religion, that it's just as strong and as powerful as it always was, but it's retreated and it's gone a long way from us. So I had that image in my mind, the melancholy, long withdrawing roar is, to my mind, that conceptual world, that world of stories that we live in. You don't fix it, you don't solve it, you don't get new concepts to beat down your old concepts, and now you've got a nicer, better world. You have left that roaring world long behind as you go into the mystic path. So that's what I was thinking of with the melancholy, long withdrawing roar. It takes some courage, because that's where you are familiar, right? When you sit and you've got 5 minutes, or you're in a car and you're in a journey, and what happens? Your mind immediately gets lost in that world. Yeah. We go back to it time and time again, even though it's not so wholesome, depending on how well you've constructed your world. I have a really nasty, stupid joke, can I tell you? It's a really dumb joke, and I don't particularly find it funny, but it makes a point. It makes a really good point. It's about a rabbit in an animal testing laboratory. And one day it escapes, and it goes out to the field, and it sees some ordinary rabbits, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And the rabbits, "Well, we're running around." He's like, "This is amazing, I didn't know we could run around." He says, "What's this stuff?" And the rabbits go, "Well, that's grass." He goes, "This is amazing. And he said, what are these rabbits? Like, oh, these are does. These are female rabbits. This is fantastic. So he has a really good afternoon out with these rabbits. And then he says, anyway, like, thanks for showing me around, but I'm going to get back to the laboratory. And the natural rabbit said, why are you going back? He said, well, I'm dying for a cigarette. I can't believe you laughed. But really, I think about this. When I practice hard, monks aren't supposed to talk about our own practice, but I'm going to anyway. I'm too old to care about these things now. When I practice really hard and I touch on this purified consciousness, it's so obvious. It's so clean and purified and fulfilling. And like when you're there, you're like, oh yeah, that stuff doesn't matter. And then what do? You go back for a cigarette in the laboratory. You go back to this conceptual world again and sit there thinking. And it's because it's familiar, because that's where you spent a lifetime constructing that world. It's challenged from all these different places, so you keep updating your constructs to try and make yourself comfortable. There is this completely other thing, and that's what we are doing on the mystic path. Anyway, that's my best attempt. You have any question? Yeah.
So when it comes to concepts, I think you made the point that on the one hand, we need them to navigate the world. If we didn't have them, we wouldn't really be able to function. But at the same time, there's this way out, the haunted world, like the metaphor you used of being in the video game, and
Right.
there's an exit window that appears. Is there any difference in sort of staying in the computer game, just knowing that it's not real and knowing there is that way out, versus being totally wrapped up in the game and thinking that it's real?
Well, the game's fun, and you can't just drop it. So make a good universe. I like to think of things, I like to build things in my mind. Lockdown was terrible for me because I started looking at all these things on YouTube. Aeroplane designs. Now I've been designing aeroplanes in my mind. And boats. I did a course on naval engineering and now I've designed all these boats. And I mean, it's fun. And I wouldn't say you can actually just leave behind the conceptual, because you yourself are a being in that conceptual framework, right? This is what no self, this is why when I say the sense of I am is really important, that sense of presence intensifies. But the I am as in the little avatar you in that conceptual universe, he has to die or learn to go to sleep. So, yes, there's fun to be had in that universe, in that world, constructed world, but this is our practice, is to exit from it. Yeah.
When you were talking about people who have to sleep in the day, you mentioned that people fall off to sleep sometimes in the day. I've seen some of my friends just nod off.
Right.
Is that a meditation or is that dozing?
That's totally. Did you hear? She said some people fall asleep in meditation and you see them dozing. Is it meditation or are they sleeping? No, they're sleeping. You get quite good at it after a while. In monasteries, sometimes we do all-night sittings. Sit from 7 p.m. till 6 o'clock in the morning. And so you get really good at sleeping sitting up. The rule is you don't let your shoulders touch the ground. But you can slump over chairs, and I have a yoga ball. You're going to fall asleep sometimes. I get this if I've been living normal life and then I really put effort into practice and I can make the mind still, and then I just get overwhelmed with like a fierce tiredness that will knock me out, and often then I'll sleep for an hour or so and I'll wake up kind of zombie-like, and then after 10 minutes suddenly I feel really alive. And I think it's sleep debt. It's all these times where you kept yourself awake to do something. Now you have to pay back the debt. So you're paying it back. There was a monk in England. You shouldn't really say these things, but he was in a very small monastery, and it was the meeting hall was just a small room. And every time he meditated, and if you were sat at the front, you'd feel this whooshing come past you. Every time, here's the abbot as well. Every time he meditated, he was like that. We used to fight not to be in the front row because he so it's to be expected. You will have times, and sometimes the mind gets overpowered, and with it, it's okay. It's part of it. Yeah. But there is a tendency with some meditation teachers to say, whatever state of mind it is, that's okay. You just be aware of it. That's not correct. There are the right states. Is the right direction to travel. And I made this mistake for a long time because I'd have thinking, and like, well, I'll just allow my thinking to be there. My mind is thinking. And no, you have to get control of the mind. The Buddha never taught, just be aware of whatever's there. So I want to be very clear, these are intensified states that arise on the mystic path, and this is what we are practicing. You can't just do it. You're going to have a lot of patience, and a lot of times when you have too much thinking, or you're too sleepy, or too doubtful, or you're caught in desire. This is normal. This is our practice.
So when that happens, do you stop for a while and come back, meditate, and just keep going?
You find your own way. Find your own thing. Sometimes you just got to stop, give up, go and do something, go and play with the cat. We have these couple of kittens, so I get a straw and go and play with the cat. Sometimes you have to do that. But you have to keep coming back. That's the thing. You don't give up and then 5-10 years and then suddenly you're sick or old or dying or in a crisis. Then it's too late. So as long as you keep coming back, it's okay.
In the jhana, when you talk about rapture, how is that? I have trouble conceptualizing that separate. How you have jhana, how you have the rapture without desire. How is that stuff?
Yeah, you want to conceptualize it. You want to build a nice little concept to get the right understanding. And now I've understood it, and I've rearranged my conceptual universe with the correct explanations and understanding. But you know that's not it, right? You have to exit that world. So that's our practice, is to exit from that conceptual universe and start moving into this raw experiencing. Then these things start to arise by themselves. But it is important to recognize it as it happens, because so many people overlook it. Yeah. As to how that works, there was a famous line in the suttas. Sariputta, the Buddha's primary disciple, had been enjoying the bliss of renunciation, which we accept to be enlightenment. And then he's walking down the path saying, this nibbana is bliss, this nibbana is bliss. And someone says to him, how can Nibbana be bliss if there is no Vedana? Vedana means pleasant or unpleasant sensation. And Sariputta replies, it is bliss because there is no Vedana. Now the Vedana, liking and disliking, applies to sensory contact. So if it's pleasant sensation because you contacted something pleasant, that's Vedana. That's what we have to withdraw from or stop that process. Piti or rapture will arise because the mind is not resting on anything. And then it just is naturally there, but it's not sense pleasure. It's not something nice to listen to, taste, eat, feel, touch, think about. Yeah. By the way, rapture, it manifests as a energization through the body. I was waiting for this, like, yay! Like, I never got my yay, but, you know, that yay when the English rugby team beats Australia, that kind of...
It's not fascination.
Huh?
Not fascination.
Not fascination. That's a good way of putting it, yeah. It is a physical sensation that comes through the body and makes you, you're like, oh yeah, you're not sleepy, you're not losing attention. And as the mind starts to latch and retreat into the conceptual world, you feel it drain. And then you touch it again and that's how it comes up.
Okay, one last question.
So, if I understand correctly, the mystic path,
Your concepts, your conceptual world.
yes, but it's requiring a lot of attention, a lot of training, and make your mind strong in a way, like your attention focus. Is it correct?
It does, it's a practice.
So how much, like how, no, okay, how much should I train myself every day? And like if I live in this world, especially in a city where everything is pulling me somewhere else, like is it, will I,
How much? You want to know is, do I have to do 15 minutes a day for 4 months and then I get my enlightenment certificate?
no, it's not a certification, it's just to get this experience.
Yeah, I don't know. It depends on each individual. And it may depend on your past karma. Usually they say, well, you've meditated in a previous life, if it's easy for you in this life. I'm not so sure about that. It may depend on your genetics, may depend on your disposition, may depend on your parenting, may depend on your nationality. I'm sure it's easier for Thais. Like, Germans, no chance.
I'm Italian, so it's even worse.
English, we get there and then we're like, nah, I want to go back for a cup of tea. And then, so I don't know. Every person is different, but what I can tell you 100% is, as you withdraw from the conceptual world, putting attention onto raw experiencing, on an object, or viewing this nature of the mind, or going into these concentration states, every moment that you spend doing that is a hammer blow on the chains that bind you. Then you, from that point on, really, I think it's a matter of faith. You have to have faith in that system. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Pandit. It's great to have you back.
Thank you.
It's great to have you all here tonight. And if you like this talk, Pandit will do a lot of talks in the coming months. He will be here until mid-November. So most of the Monday evenings, he will lead our session. With the exception normally of the first Monday of every month, like next Monday.
The fire sermon, the Buddha's second teaching, the fire sermon.
Okay, the fire sermon it is. So thank you for that. Then the practical points as always. Please, if you like to talk and if you like that this venue has been made available for us, there's 2 donation boxes outside and you can show your gratitude there by putting some of that paper money in the box. And you would help us greatly if you help us cleaning up the room with the brown seats have to be folded and you go to the balcony. And with the exception of 6 seats, the other white seat go behind the girl. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much.
I can do the blessing before we go. Sabitiyo vivajantu sabbarogo vinasatu mate bhavatvantarayo sukhiti gayuko abhava abhivadana sili sanichang Buddha pachayino chattaro dhamma Vadanti ayuvano sukhang balang. Okay. I'm also still here if anybody wants to ask any questions or chat or say hello. Yeah.
Thank you.